And then from there, he had gone, once he had learned of Saul's determination to put him to death, he had fled from there and gone to see the priests, the priests at Nob, where the tabernacle was set up after it had been after Shiloh had been destroyed. Saul now comes and confronts Ahimelech. We see that we started to read this last week. Here in verse 6 of chapter 22, then Saul heard that David and his men were with him had been discovered. Now Saul was sitting in Gibeah under a tamarisk tree at the height on the height with his spear in his hand, and his servants were standing around him. And Saul said to his servants who stood around him, "Hear now, O Benjamites, will the son of Jesse also give you fields, all of you fields and vineyards? Will he make you all commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds? For all of you have conspired against me, so that there is no one who discloses to me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse, and there's none of you who is sorry for me or discloses to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in ambush, as it is to this day." Then Doeg the Edomite, who was standing by the servants of Saul, answered and said, "I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech the son of Ahitub. And he inquired of the Lord for him, and gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine." Several things we pointed out from this passage. First of all, is that here is Saul basically saying, well, nobody feels sorry for me. I mean, tamarisk, I think it might be, I think other translations might call it a type of an oak. I'm not 100% sure what kind of a tree that really is. But the fact that Saul is sitting underneath there, and it pointedly says he's got his spear in his hand, which is indicating that he's coming out intending to fight, intending to find David and kill him personally, apparently. If he's sitting there with his spear in his hand, he's intending to kill David personally, and he'll kill anybody that gets between him and David. It's clear that he is completely wrapped up in this task. Again, it's a type of cedar. Okay, maybe not an oak, type of a cedar. Maybe it is a source of turpentine or something like that. I don't know. But Saul is sitting there. And again, you find these incredible statements. Here he is, the king of Israel, and he's wondering why no one feels sorry for him. I mean, it's an incredible scene, and speaks of his mental confusion, his mental state, that he wants people to feel sorry for him. That here's David, who has done no wrong to him, and yet he's got all these imaginations going through his head. Yes. It's not only look what I've done for you, but do you think David's going to do the same things for you that I've done for you? It's that it is a political one-upsmanship. It's, I've given you all this prosperity, I've given you all this power, I've given you all of these good things. Do you think David's going to do that for you? And it is a political appeal. And then in verse 9, we see where Doeg, who is this Edomite, he is not an Israelite, he is from Edom. And he announces to Saul, well, I saw David coming into Ahimelech. Now notice as Doeg gives this account, he omits a fairly crucial set of information. from this account, because he told Saul, yeah, David came here and Ahimelech helped him. He doesn't bother to mention why Ahimelech helped him. We find out, of course, by reading the text that Ahimelech had helped David because David had told him he was on a mission for the king. And when later, as we'll see here in the next section, as Ahimelech asserts his innocence, of course, Saul's not interested in hearing it. Verse 11 says, Then the king sent someone to summon Ahimelech, the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's household. The priests who were with Nob, and all of them came to the king. And Saul said, Listen now, son of Ahitub. And he answered, Here I am, my lord. Saul then said to him, Why have you and the son of Jesse conspired against me? And then you had given him bread and a sword, and have inquired of God for him, that he should rise up against me by lying in ambush, as it is this day. Then Ahimelech answered the king and said, And who among all your servants is as faithful as David? Even the king's son-in-law, who is captain over your own guard, and is honored in your house. Did I just begin to inquire of God for him today? Far be it from me. Do not let the king impute anything to his servant or to any of the household of my father, for your servant knows nothing at all of this whole affair. Here's Ahimelech's defense. First, he points out, first of all, wait a minute, this is your captain of the guard. This is your son-in-law. This is a member of your court. This is one of your trusted advisors who's come to me. And I didn't just start doing this today. I've been doing this apparently for some time for him, where I've been advising him according to what you had directed. Is the implication here that David had gone to Ahimelech many times before on behalf of Saul to make inquiry. And so you can imagine that Ahimelech is first of all, shocked by this accusation. And second of all, he's pleading innocence. I don't know anything. I know nothing at all about this, is what he's saying. I have no idea what's going on. Notice how, how Saul tries to paint the picture. We look at the words of Saul. This is, I think, to me, fairly interesting. He says that he should, in verse 13, rise up against me by lying in ambush. See, that's the paranoia at work. There is Saul's paranoia on full display there. David is trying to get me, and he's going to try and get me by stealth or by surprise. David's going to try and sneak up on me. David's going to try and ambush me. And again, we understand that paranoia, that intense paranoia that Saul's fighting with. And of course, Ahimelech doesn't know anything about this. He's just there doing his job, doing service to the king as he's always done it. And as far as he knows, everything is okay between David and Saul. Why would he think anything differently? Saul doesn't want to hear it, of course. In verse 16, the king said, You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's household. And the king said to the guards who were tending him, Turn around and put the priests of the Lord to death, because their hand is also with David, and because they knew that he was fleeing and did not reveal it to me. But the servants of the king were not willing to put forth their hands to attack the priests of the Lord. Now that again is a very telling thing. Here's the king who's telling these soldiers that are with him, you put these priests to death. And the soldiers are basically saying, Not me, boss. I'm not doing this. Now, can you imagine? You can imagine the rage that would have invoked in Saul. Saul is wanting, these soldiers, by the way, we find out from up above, these soldiers are mostly, if not all, Benjamites. They're all from Benjamin. They're all even from his own tribe, basically his own clan. And they're telling him, we're not doing this. We're not going to be involved in this. And again, you can imagine Saul's rage. You can imagine Saul's frustration. But we also see in here, these men they know everything that's transpired. They've been with Saul this entire time. They've been with him when he left from his camp. They've been with him as he's traveled to Nob. They've heard this exchange between Saul. They know of David. They know of, they know everything that's going on. And they're hearing this story from Ahimelech, and they're basically saying, I'm not going to be involved in this. And again, is a very telling commentary on how utterly berserk Saul is becoming in his desperate effort to kill David, in that even his own soldiers, even his own sort of family members, won't go along with him on his madness. They just, no, we're not participating in this. Yeah, why didn't he do it? That's a good question. So instead, he turns to this Doeg, this Edomite, who's not even of his family, not even an Israelite. Then the king said to Doeg, you turn around and attack the priest. And Doeg the Edomite turned around and attacked the priest, and he killed that day 85 men who wore the linen ephod. And he struck Nob, the city of the priests, with the edge of the sword, both men and women, children and infants, also oxen, donkeys, and sheep he struck with the edge of the sword. Now, there's quite a bit of irony here, as some of the commentators have pointed out. Here was Saul, who couldn't be bothered to attack the Amalekites. God had told him to utterly destroy the Amalekites. He would utterly destroy them, leave nothing alive. And instead, he goes down, he keeps the best of the flock. He keeps, keeps the best of the cattle. He keeps, this and that. And he also keeps the king of the Amalekites alive. And can't be bothered to fulfill that command from God. But when it comes to attacking his own people, the priests of God, oh, well, yeah, apparently he can do that. And so there's a fair amount of irony here. There's a fair amount of just nonsense out of Saul's mouth about this, as we see here, that he would consider such a thing. Again, we notice what happens. They killed it. They left none alive. They slaughtered every living thing in that village. And you begin to see why even his own soldiers won't obey him. This is a command so shocking, so sinful. They're not gonna. It's up to this foreigner, Doeg. We commented last week that some of the scholars who look at this suggest that Doeg might have been detained here in Nob because of some illegality he may have been involved in, and may have been detained, in a sort of a police matter, what we would call a police matter, and that might explain why he's mad at these priests because they have accused him, and well, he'll just wipe them out, and so he now has permission from Saul to do so, and he does. Verse 20, but one son of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. Then David said to Abiathar, I knew that on that day when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul, I have brought about the death of every person in your father's household. Stay with me, do not be afraid, for he who seeks my life seeks your life, therefore you are safe with me. Abiathar flees. Abiathar is Ahimelech's younger son. Again, some of the Bible scholars looking at this felt that when Abiathar is summoned, when Ahimelech rather is summoned to come before Saul and bring the priests with him, that they left one behind to kind of keep an eye on the tabernacle and kind of keep it safe. That would have been this son, probably who was there by himself. He hears of this slaughter taking place, and he runs. He runs, of course, off to David. but we see this switching now in this dramatic event here, that the priesthood had before been on Saul's side. Okay, the priesthood had before been with Saul. He had the religious, he had not only the political control, but he also had the religious, basically the religious structure as well in his hand. Now the religious structure is gone. It's been pulled from him and it's been given to David. And Saul has done it effectively. He has thrown away that religious hold, and he's given it to David. Yeah. Yes. That's correct. Yes, that's a good point. That God had prophesied this. God had informed Samuel this was going to happen in some way, because he knew that the house of Eli was going to be left desolate. And Saul, of all people, becomes the instrument of that fulfillment. All right. From there, then we go into. Oh, go ahead. Yes. Yes. Yeah, David says, you're going to be as safe as anywhere with me, as safe as you can be. I think is the implication, but you're right. David was trusting God, and just as David was trusting God to protect him, David was trusting God to protect those with him. And that's a good comment. All right, from there then we go into chapter 25. It says, then they told David, saying, behold, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah and are plundering the threshing floors. Now, Keilah was over near the kind of the southeastern border of Judah, near Philistia, near the nation of Philistia. And the Philistines apparently are raiding in to steal grain. This was a common tactic in this time. If you wanted to get rid of an enemy, well, the best way of getting rid of an enemy is to starve them out. Why, you'd go in wherever when they're producing their crops, you'd steal all their crop produce, and you'd leave them to starve to death until the next time the crops came in, in which you'd come and raid them again. We found that the other nations were doing this. They were doing Moab, for example, did this back in the days of the Judges. If you remember the times when we were studying from the Judges, how the Israelites were trying to hide their produce away from the Moabites, who would come raiding in, and they know when the crops are being harvested, and they come raiding in and they steal the food. And the idea is that we'll starve them out. And the Philistines had adopted the same tactic here. They're going to raid in and they're going to starve these people out and drive them off the land this way. And so we find here, so David inquires of the Lord, saying, shall I go and attack these Philistines? And the Lord said to David, go and attack the Philistines and deliver Keilah. But David's men said to him, behold, we are afraid here in Judah. How much more if we go to Keilah against the ranks of the Philistines? But basically, David's men are wanting to pull back. They're going, we're on the run here, David. What are you talking about? We're going to go fight the Philistines. We're on the run. This isn't a time for going on the attack against anybody. This is a time for hunkering down and staying hidden, is the logic. David, of course, wants to go help. So David inquired, verse 4, David inquires of the Lord once more, and the Lord answered again and said, arise, go down to Keilah, for I will give the Philistines into your hands. And so here is the command from God. Why would God command, or why would God direct David to do such a thing? Gary? Well, yeah. I think both of those are accurate. There are two aspects here. One is the fact that, yes, God is determined that the Israelites are going to triumph over the Philistines, and David is going to be that instrument. That's the one thing. And then the second thing, too, is, yes, David is the Lord's anointed. David is the future king of Israel, and God is expecting him to act like the king or the future king. And that future king says, as being the future king, that means I'm giving you the job. You go down and save them. Because we find here, as we read here, Saul has no role at all in this activity. Saul is so busy chasing David, he doesn't have time for the basic things like keeping the borders safe. And he's so obsessed with pursuing David that he can't be bothered with his basically his core responsibilities. We see that the Philistines here, it says here in verse 5, so David and his men went to Keilah and fought with the Philistines, and he led away their livestock and struck them with great slaughter. Now that's very key there too. He led away their livestock. And the predecessor verb here, or noun rather, here is Philistines. So it had to be the Philistines' livestock. Here are the Philistines. We got two possible scenarios here, both of which are fairly interesting. One scenario is that the Philistines have been raiding other places and have come along with livestock from their raids in other parts of this region. The other idea is that the Philistines have brought their own livestock with them, with the idea of feeding their livestock off the produce of this land. They are so confident of victory, they bring in their animals with them, going, "Yeah, we're gonna wipe these Israelites out, and we're gonna take their food and feed our animals." Both of which presumes a great arrogance on the part of the Philistines. The Philistines just can't even conceive of getting beat in battle. Maybe they know that Saul's nowhere in the vicinity. That may be a possibility, that they're so focused on what Saul's doing that they're not watching to see what anybody else is doing. And Saul's off chasing something. They don't know, maybe they don't know who or what or why, but Saul's not around. So they think this is going to be an easy victory. They're anticipating an easy win. And suddenly here comes David with his army, or his force, if you will. David shows up, and next thing you know, the Philistines are, fighting for their lives and losing. So, we find out here that here's David taking on more and more of the role of king as Saul more and more abdicates the role of king. How does David talk to the Lord? Well, we find, of course, out here later in this next chapter we're about to read that Abiathar has shown up. He's brought an ephod with him, and this is a means of getting answer from God, of inquiring of God and getting answer from him. Verse 6. Now it came about when Abiathar, the son of Ahimelech, fled to David at Keilah, that he came down with an ephod in his hand. When it was told Saul that David had come to Keilah, Saul said, "God has delivered him into my hand, for he has shut himself in by entering a city with double gates and bars." So Saul summoned all the people for war to go down to Keilah to besiege David and his men. Now David knew that Saul was plotting evil against him, so he said to Abiathar the priest, "Bring the ephod here." Then David said, O Lord God of Israel, thy servant has heard that for certain that Saul is seeking to come to Keilah to destroy the city on my account. Will the men of Keilah surrender me into his hand? Will Saul come down just as his servant has heard? O Lord God of Israel, I pray, tell thy servant. And the Lord said, he will come down. Then David said, will the men of Keilah surrender me and my men into the hand of Saul? And the Lord said, they will surrender you. Then David and his men, about 600, arose and departed from Keilah, and they went wherever they could go. When it was told Saul that David had escaped from Keilah, he gave up the pursuit. And David stayed in the wilderness in the strongholds and remained in the hill country in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul sought him every day, but God did not deliver him into his hand. All right, a number of again interesting things in this passage. First of all, Saul, of course, learns that David's in Keilah. Couldn't be bothered. Saul, of course, couldn't be bothered to go to Keilah when the Philistines are raiding. But the minute he finds out David's there, it's gather up the armies. We're going after David. Again, you see that obsession that Saul has about getting rid of David. He ought to be instead honoring David for rescuing the city, for saving this entire region from the Philistines. But instead, this ungrateful man is going to find him and put him to death. There's no doubt among most of the Bible scholars that the events of Nob have been broadcast throughout the nation. Everybody knows what happened at Nob now. And so all of these folks are terrified of the king. You can imagine what people are thinking. We got a madman for a king. We got a man who will kill you indiscriminately unless you give him exactly what he wants. And right now what he wants is David. And so you can understand that these people are terrified. And so here are the city leaders. David inquires. The commentators suggest that David, through Abiathar, has access to the Urim and Thummim. If we read over in Exodus to read about this, the artifacts, Exodus 28 and verse 30 says, "And you shall put in the breastpiece of the judgment the Urim and Thummim, and they shall be over Aaron's heart when he goes in before the Lord. And Aaron shall carry the judgment of the sons of Israel over his heart before the Lord continually." These artifacts, I don't know that we know what they are, but they were artifacts of some sort that were used in communication with God. The text here suggests that they were used in some way one would pray to God, and one would then pose a question with a yes or no answer. And we see that David, in fact, poses two questions like that. Will these men deliver me up? Or first of all, will Saul come to Keilah? Yes. Second question, will these men deliver me up? Yes. And so we see the answer that he gets. This text, though, is fairly important because it also shows us something of the conditional nature of God. And we want to kind of emphasize that a little bit because there are certain doctrines around even today that try to suggest that when God gives a prophecy, it is never conditional. Well, that's obviously not true. In this case, we have an example here that God's prophecy was conditional. We have, for example, many prophecies about God's concern for the nation of Israel. We have God's promise, for example, to the Israelites that he would give them that land forever. But we also understand that was all conditional. All of that prophecy and promise was conditional. It was conditional on their obedience. It was conditional upon their behavior toward God. And in this case, God makes the prophecy. Will Saul come? Yes, he will. Will these men deliver me over? Yes, they will. Did Saul actually come? No. Did these men actually deliver him over? No. Why? Because David ran away. The condition was broken. The condition had changed, and since the condition had changed, it changed the nature of the prophecy. Okay? Just to give you this, I put this map on here just to kind of give us a little bit of the geography of David going around here, and to show you a little bit. Because David David and Saul are up here in Gibeah. When David, of course, goes to Ramah first, then to Nob, finally goes to Gath. We've read about his time in Gath. He leaves from Gath because he's afraid of the Philistines, and he goes over here. He gets his family, his father and mother, and they go over here to Moab. And we remember that he's over here at Moab for a period of time. When he's told to return, he does return. He goes back here into this hill country of Judah. He's gone now to Keilah. And from Keilah now, he flees from Keilah because he knows that David or Saul's on the way, and he moves west or eastward. He moves eastward now toward the Dead Sea. And so we're going to find him now in this area, mainly in this valley of Arba is right here. We're going to find David here in this valley of Arba, in this region that sort of overlooks the land of the Dead Sea. All right, so David goes and flees into this area, this wilderness area in southeastern section of Judah toward the Dead Sea. Verse 15. Now David became aware that Saul had come out to seek his life while David was in the wilderness at Ziph at Horesh. And Jonathan, Saul's son, arose and went to David at Horesh and encouraged him in God. Thus he said to him, "Do not be afraid, because the hand of Saul my father shall not find you, and you will be king over Israel, and I will be next to you, and Saul my father knows that also." So the two of them made a covenant before the Lord, and David stayed at Horesh while Jonathan went to his house. Now this is a very remarkable, just a few passages here, almost a side note, if you will, to the storyline, yet very significant here. First of all, a couple of remarkable things is that, first of all, Jonathan apparently has no problem finding David. Here's Saul, who's looking all over the place for him, can't find him. Jonathan can find him fairly easily. Jonathan goes to meet him. It is clear that God and God's people are protecting David, while Jonathan, David's friend, can find him fairly quickly, because apparently the word is out that yes, Saul wants to kill him, but Jonathan is his friend. And so there's a suggestion here that lots and lots of people know what's going on here. They're becoming aware of what's going on in this situation. The other thing that's remarkable here is, again, we need to remember Jonathan's position here. Jonathan is the crown prince. He is the heir apparent. And yet he goes to David. He goes to David to encourage him in God, and he promises, as you see here, he promises to be next to you. He understands you're going to be king next, and if God wills, I'll be next to you. And in effect, he's offering his services. He's the crown prince, but he's offering his services to David, saying, I'm going to be there to help you. If God wills, I'll be there to help you. And again, that speaks tremendously of the humility of Jonathan. In contrast to his father, who apparently has no humility, we find a great deal of the humility and the care and concern that Jonathan has. It's really a remarkable statement on his part that, yes, if you're willing, I'll serve you under your administration. They make vows again. Probably this, again, the Bible scholars suggest this is a renewal of the vows they've already made of mutual protection. And of course, David is fully willing to do that. And again, a real commentary on the nature of Jonathan here as he is trying to help his friend. We also see something of Saul's reliance now on the hand of man, because now in verse 19, then the Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah, saying, is David not hiding with us in the strongholds of Horesh on the hill of Halitcha, which is at the south of Jezimon? Now then, O king, come down according to all of the desire of your soul to do so, and our part shall be to surrender him into the king's hand. Again, no doubt the word about what's happened at Nob has gotten a broadcast throughout the nation of Israel. They all know what Saul did to Nob. And everybody is now thinking, well, we don't want to be, we don't want to be in the path of Saul as he's trying to get a hold of David. We better be helping Saul. And so they're determined to help Saul out because they've already seen if there's even the slightest suspicion you're helping David, you're dead. So they're going to try and defend themselves. They're going to try and protect themselves we'll offer him up. We know where he is, King Saul. We know where he is, and we'll deliver him up for you. Trying to curry a little favor there. And we see what Saul says. Saul says, may you be blessed of the Lord, for you have had compassion on me. Again, Saul's trying to play the pity, the pity card. Look, nobody likes me. Nobody's caring about me. But now here you guys have come, you're going to have compassion on me. And again, you see something of the mindset of Saul as he's trying to play this pity card. He says, go now, make sure and investigate and see this place where his haunt is and who has seen him there, for I am told he is very cunning. Look and learn about all the hiding places where he hides himself, and return to me with certainty, and I will go with you, and it will come about that if he is in the land, that I will search him out from among all the thousands of Judah. Again, we see Saul's reliance. He's going to put his reliance, but notice the language that he's using here, this repeated instruction and command. We see him say, go, make sure, investigate, see, learn, look, return to me with certainty. All of this is, trying to, we see the emphasis here, the absolute emphasis he has here on let's find David and let's get rid of David. It's an obsession. It's like, if you've ever read the book Moby Dick and you read, Captain Ahab searching for the white whale and the obsession that the man has, you see the same thing that Saul has for David. He's insane with this obsession. David writes about this over in Psalms 54. Again, we get a little bit of insight into David's thinking. Into David's thinking as he realizes that he's being sold out by the Ziphites. We read over here in Psalm 54, as it says here at the top of it, for the choir director on stringed instruments, a maskil of David, when the Ziphites came and said to Saul, is not David hiding himself among us? And David writes and says, save me, O God, by thy name, and vindicate me by thy power. Hear my prayer, O God. Give ear to the words of my mouth. For strangers have risen against me, and violent men have sought my life. They have not set God before them. Behold, God is my helper. The Lord is the sustainer of my soul. He will recompense the evil to my foes, destroy them in thy faithfulness. Willingly I sacrifice to thee. I will give thanks to thy name, O Lord, for it is good. For he has delivered me from all trouble, and my eye has looked with satisfaction upon my enemies. Again, you see something of David's mind here. He's got to feel like he's fairly friendless. Every hand is practically against him and his men. He's running from place to place, trying to get away from Saul. And everywhere he goes, everybody's willing to turn him over to Saul. And here comes Saul charging in like a bull to try and get him again. Rick, you got a comment? Yeah. Yes. That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, he has no intention. He's basically, may God bless you because you've done something I wanted done. and it's a shallow. It's a shallow idea. It's a shallow idea of the nature of God. That these folks should be blessed when he knows that God is on David's side. He knows that. He's admitted it. He admits it multiple times that he knows that God is on David's side, and yet here these folks are that are trying to help him against David, and he thinks that somehow God is going to bless them. No, that you're right. It's a shallow, it's a throwaway sentence, and I think you're right. It's kind of a throwaway idea. It's you're telling people what you think they want to hear instead of what they need to hear. That's a good point. From there, then David goes into. So David flees from there. Verse 24 says, "Then they arose and went to Ziph before Saul. Now David and his men were in the wilderness of Maon, in the Arba, to the south of Jezimon." Now again, this is this valley area. This is this valley area that goes down towards the Dead Sea. It's to the north and to the west of the Dead Sea, and but it's very rugged land. I got a photograph or two. I'll show you here in a moment. It's very rugged land, very barren land. When Saul and his men went to seek him, they told David, and he came down to the rock and stayed in the wilderness of Maon. And when Saul heard it, he pursued David into the wilderness of Maon. And Saul went on one side of the mountain, and David and his men were on the other side of the mountain. And David was hurrying to get away from Saul, for Saul and his men were surrounding David and his men to seize him. So there is apparently, from what we're told by the folks that are familiar with this area, there's apparently some kind of a prominent rock there, some kind of a conical shaped rock in this area of Maon. And what was happening, as we read here, is that David is on one side of it and Saul and his army on the other, but Saul and his men are starting to surround David. And so David is in effect trapped here. And Saul is within just a little bit of having in his grasp what he wants, but now we see the providence of God. Verse 27, "But a messenger came to Saul saying, 'Hurry and come, for the Philistines have made a raid on the land.'" Oh, wait a minute, you're going to have to break off this because there's an emergency. You're going to have to stop what you're doing now and go take care of this emergency. It's time for you to start being king again and quit this silliness of chasing after David. And so Saul has to break off. He has to go break off against the Philistines. So Saul returned from pursuing David, verse 28, and went to meet the Philistines. Therefore they called that place the Rock of Escape. And David went up from there and stayed in the strongholds of En-gedi. This wilderness of En-gedi, again, you see what's happening. Here is, again, God's providence. God doesn't want David harmed. Fine. He sends, here comes a messenger. Saul, you're going to have to stop this because the Philistines are raiding. David, in the meantime, is able to escape. He goes again further east towards the Dead Sea and ends up in this area called En-gedi, which overlooks actually the Dead Sea. There is this place. I don't know if you can see this very well or not. Hopefully you can. But up here there's a natural spring that comes down. This is actually called the David Spring, because this is where most of the scholars believe that David was hiding out, was in this kind of sheltered area. You can see here where it's got this natural spring that comes down. You get some idea of the scale if you look down here at the bottom part of that picture. It's kind of hard to see, but that right there is a man standing there, right there, right underneath it's probably hard to see on that screen, but that's a man standing there. And so you get some idea of the scale of this thing, that this is obviously maybe a couple of 100 feet tall. And this waterfall comes down and then drains into a pool down in this area, and then comes on down the side of the cliff. And so there's David. All right, I'm going to stop there. We'll pick this up again next week. I appreciate your attention this morning. We'll continue on with chapter 24 next week.